Hey, what's going on everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today I am super excited because I finally got my hands on the all-new Red Magic 6S Pro. And one of the main reasons I'm excited about this is because it's powered by the all-new Snapdragon 888 Plus. And when you compare it to the original 888, we do have higher clocks on the CPU and GPU side of things, so we should see a significant boost in performance along with that powerhouse of an ARM CPU. We also have a 6.8-inch AMOLED 165Hz display with up to 700 nits of brightness. If you're familiar with these Red Magic phones, you know most of them do come with a built-in cooling solution. This has active cooling built in. And since this is the Pro model of the 6S, we do have that transparent back, which looks absolutely amazing in my opinion. And the fan does have a little bit of an RGB setup, but unfortunately I haven't found any way to control it, so we're just going to be stuck with those colors, but overall it does add a bit to the rear of this thing. When I'm taking a look at the specs on paper, this does seem to be the most powerful Android device that I've ever been able to test on the channel, but you know, next year or maybe in a couple months, something more powerful will come out, so definitely keep that in mind. That's just how technology works. When it comes down to the specs, we have that Snapdragon 888 Plus, the GPU is the Adreno 660, 16GB of LPDDR5 Ram, 256GB of storage, and this is using UFS 3.1, a 6.8-inch AMOLED display, up to 165Hz with a resolution of 1080 by 2400. We have 3 rear cameras, a 64MP, 8 and 2, the front is an 8MP, under display fingerprint reader. It's got a 5050 mAh battery, this is non-user replaceable, with 66-watt quick charging, and it's running Android 11 with Red Magic UI 4.5 right out of the box. Another thing I'd like to mention, which actually is really important to me when it comes to these gaming phones, is the USB interface here does support display over USB Type-C, so we can connect this to a bigger screen, be it a monitor or a television. When it comes to the overall performance of the phone, it's super snappy, and going into this, you know, I expected it to be with that Snapdragon 888 Plus. Everything's been working really well here, but there are some really awesome features built into this device because it is a gaming phone. We have this switch over on the side. Once we turn this on, it's going to bring us into Red Magic time. I guess that's what they used to call it. I'm still calling it that. This is basically a game launcher that we can add plugins to our games. So we have a bunch of different stuff here. We have a sound equalizer. There's the little zoom in feature, which is definitely cheating. We can also put a crosshair on screen. We can add the FPS on screen. And overall, this will help out with gaming on Android, be it native Android games or even emulation. I just started up Genshin Impact, and if we swipe over from the right hand side, you can see that we have a plethora of different options. But my favorite is adjusting the CPU performance per game. We have 4 different options here, and the last one will give us a warning telling us that it's going to create a lot of heat, because this is going to jack up that CPU and GPU frequency, so we do have the fan going. But another great tool that I utilize a lot with these phones is the on-screen FPS counter. This is a real-time FPS counter. It'll let us know how well our games are running. This is not giving us the refresh rate of the screen. This is giving us the real FPS of the game we're playing at any given time. But there are a lot of useful tools in this package. Now for this video here, we're just really going to be taking a look at the gaming performance and emulation performance of this device. The first thing I always like to do with these high-end Android phones is run some benchmarks, so let's check those out first. First up, we have Geekbench 5. On the left-hand side, we have the Red Magic 6S Pro. On the right-hand side, we have the Red Magic 5 with the original Snapdragon 888. As you can see, the 6S Pro did beat it out in single and multi-core. Moving over to 3D Mark Wildlife, this is a Vulkan benchmark for the GPU. On the 6S Pro, 5,871. On the 5, we scored a 5,089. So we took that win again with the 6S Pro. And finally, Antutu. So this was actually a little odd. I ran it 3 times on the Red Magic 5. This was the best score that I got out of this. I think it can do better. I'm not sure if it's a compatibility issue with the version of Antutu we're using, or if it's holding the score back because it thinks that the phone is rooted, which it actually isn't. But as you can see, the 6S Pro came ahead in everything versus the Red Magic 5. Alright, so now it's time to move over to some native Android gaming. This is Genshin Impact, and I have it maxed out. We're at the highest settings, 60 FPS, and I'm really impressed by the performance here. I do have that FPS counter on screen so we can see what's going on, and I do see some dips down to around 58, maybe even 56 every once in a while, but at the highest settings, 60 FPS, this is definitely some of the best performance that I've seen out of this game on an Android device. If you've played this game before, you know how hard it can be to run at the highest settings, and this is looking really, really good. I would personally probably drop some of the stuff just down to high, maybe turn bloom off, but overall, if you wanted to rock this with the highest settings at 60, it's doing pretty good. Moving over to Fortnite, high settings. By the way, I'm using an Xbox One controller connected over Bluetooth. It's running great, but unfortunately we just can't tick that box to go to 60 FPS yet on this device. I'm not sure if it's because it's not whitelisted with this game, or if Epic is just holding these other devices back. I know some of the higher end Samsung stuff has the option in the settings to go to 60, but when it comes to devices like this, I haven't really seen it that much. And the final game I wanted to test here was Call of Duty Mobile, where at very high settings I have the FPS set to max, where it's 60 and the game runs amazingly. This is a very well optimized game, and I didn't think we'd have any issues on the Snapdragon 888 Plus. So with native Android games, you're really not going to have any issues with anything on the Google Play Store, but now it's time to move over to my favorite part of these videos, emulation. So first up, we have PSP using the standalone version of PPSSPP, 4X resolution, Vulkan backend, and by the way, this is just a little portable monitor. I have it plugged into the USB Type-C port on the Red Magic 6S Pro, that way we get a video feed out and we can see it a bit better. But when it comes to PSP emulation on this device, we're getting amazing performance. You could use OpenGL if you want to. I really didn't see much of a difference between OpenGL and Vulkan, and even with the harder to run games like Ghost of Sparta, we can still do 4X resolution. We could probably go higher, but you know, the resolution on the built-in screen isn't much more than 4X here, and it's just not going to make a huge difference. So PSP is great. Now it's time to take it up a notch to Gamecube using the Dolphin Emulator. And by the way, this is not the Dolphin Emulator that you get from the Google Play Store. You're just going to head over to the official Dolphin website and download the latest development build. We're at 2X resolution, Vulkan backend, Time Splitters 2 running at 60. We're getting really great performance when it comes to Gamecube and even Wii on this device here. But Time Splitters 2 isn't a really hard game to emulate on ARM devices, so let's take it up to Automodalista. This one has always given me trouble on these ARM devices, but here, even at 2X, we're getting 60 FPS. You'll see it fluctuate between 58 to 60, but you know, I call that playable. I wouldn't notice it if the FPS counter wasn't on screen. And since I'm here, I figured I'd go ahead and test out some Wii using the same emulator, 2X resolution, Vulkan backend. Amazing performance here. The 3DS is one of those newer emulators to Android. I mean, it's been out for a while, but it's still under heavy development. I'm using Citra NMJ from GitHub, 2X resolution, and we're getting pretty decent performance. I do see it dip every once in a while. We got a couple sound issues here and there, but overall, this emulator has been coming a long way on Android, and it's getting better and better every single week. The final thing I wanted to test on this device was some PS2 emulation. I'm using Damon PS2 Pro from the Google Play Store, and this is really the only PS2 emulator that really works on Android right now. I know there's a lot of controversy behind it, but they have done some updates recently, and I always get a ton of viewers asking me to test this out on newer devices, especially these higher-end Snapdragon chips. I gotta say that with these new updates, performance in a lot of these games has increased drastically, but if you take a closer look here, there is a lot of frame skip going on with God of War 2, and that's just really how it is with PS2 emulation on Android right now. Without these hacks, this game would probably run at about 20 FPS, but with the hacks in the background, you can get it up to 60. It's still not super smooth because we're skipping frames, but it is kind of playable here. So overall, yeah, this is definitely a powerhouse of a device. This Snapdragon 888 Plus is an absolute beast when it comes to these ARM devices. The Snapdragon 890 or whatever they call it will be more powerful, and it'll probably be out at the end of the year, so keep an eye out for that. But the way it sits right now, as of making this video, the Red Magic 6S Pro is the most powerful Android device that I've ever tested on my channel for native Android gaming, even in benchmarks, and especially for emulation. When it comes to battery life, you can get around 15 hours of video playback out of this. I'd say 10 hours of web browsing. And if you're looking to do some high-end Android gaming, totally maxed out with that CPU set to the max performance mode, you're probably only going to see 3 to 3.5 hours of gameplay. I mean, that's continuous gameplay, but keep in mind, I mean, this thing is drawing some power, especially when everything's maxed out. So yeah, it's definitely a great gaming/emulation device. If you're interested in learning more about this, I will leave a few links in the description. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now that, if you got one with the 8 gigs or 12 gigs of RAM, I think the non-pro version is, you're not going to see much of a difference at all. 16 gigabytes of RAM in this thing is way overkill, but at the end of the day, it's really nice to know that this thing's rocking as much RAM as my desktop PC. So that's going to wrap it up for this one. I really appreciate you watching. If you have any questions or if there's anything at all you want to see running on the Red Magic 6S Pro, just let me know in the comments below. But like always, thanks for watching.